Now let's try understanding how the data can be passed from the UI itself. So a very simple example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another view here, specifically a view which will pass on the data from the form to the UI. And for that purpose, I'm going to create one view which is specifically for creating an employee. So let me add here a view. Let's call this view as create, maybe EMP. That will be the name of the view. Create view, I'll call it as. We have ASPX engine as it is. No master page to be referred as of now. And let's click on add. And then at the top, as you can see, we have again the type to be referred is dynamic. So I'm going to make a small change again. This view that we are going to create is the earlier view that we created was for representation of collection of employees. The other view that we have is not for collection. The other view that we have is for single employee. Single employee creation, single employee representation. So I'm going to copy only this much part. And in create ASPX, I'm going to convey test mvc.models.emp. Next part, what I'm going to do is inside the div, I'm going to create now a couple of text boxes. One which will be holding number, one will be holding name, and one will be holding address values as per the structure of this model itself. So what I expect here is I'm expecting to create I'm going to create one method here, just like edit is a method and we passed on number and name. Same way we can pass on address. Can we ask any method on controller side to create or to hold the object of type employee itself? Number, string, integer, these are all very basic types that we have, and these are default types which are easily understood. But then what if I have some method like this, action result, and which conveys something called as create here? And imagine a situation wherein a parameter expected is of type EMP itself. So can we pass on EMP object as it is to the server instead of passing parameters in the query string format, and that too multiple parameters in the method itself? So again I'm going to return null from here, and before I even pass on any parameter, whenever a call needs to be given to a create method, I want to pass on employees class object. Now let's go to my view again. Sorry, let's go to create view again. In the create view, we already have specified this is of type employee. And what I want to do now, I need to represent employee in some form. So I need to represent employee in the form of some text boxes. So let me create a table for us. Let me specify this is going to be number value presentation. Let's have tag called as input. Type is equal to text. Let's have ID or name for the control, and let's have a name for the control similar to, you can say, employees property. It's number right now. Let's put BR. Again, let's construct here name. So user's name, again input type equal to text and name equal to name in capital. Let's remove the blank space. Number also does not carry any value, so we can just skip that part. And then we'll have BR again. And in final place, what will we do is we'll try to add one more parameter which is called as an address. Yeah. Let's put the parameter name again as address, and value is all empty right now. So initially what we want to do is we want to represent any value into number, name and address, and whatsoever value comes up from the UI, or we want to collect that value from the UI to the server side. So some things to do. Initially, in order to get the values from the user, we have to first of all show the UI to the user. I mean to say, if at all you are going to create any employee, first of all I should have a UI in front of me, which helps me create the employee class object itself, or helps me create employee details itself. So what I'm going to do is, instead of returning null from here, in the first place, we will never get employee. Reason, we are yet to create it and we have to provide that UI to the end user. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to simply specify here, return a view. So as we discussed earlier, whenever you call a method like create, for example, And whenever we have a view, simply empty bracket, a view method called, it's going to go and search for a view with the same name as that of action method. This method is called as action method. So we already have a view here called as create.aspx. Inside create.aspx, if you see, we have got empty text boxes with specific names, number, name and address written, and it conveys that the model for this particular create ASPX is of type employee object. Now let's see what happens if I give a call to create method. So let me put a breakpoint again here. Let me run the default code. So it's going to break into index first. Let it be. And then I'm going to type by myself something called as home/create. Let's say enter now. The time we say enter, it's going to look for a view with the name create.aspx. Let's say continue. We already have one, need not worry. And now as you can see, we have got home/create available. So in order to pass on some data, I should get a UI first. This is what we intend to do. Now that we have UI available, we can very well go and insert any data that we want here. Suppose if I put 4, if I put a new name, and if I put suppose new address over here. What I want to do is I want to submit this data from the UI side to the server side. And then on click of some button, I wish to pass on this data back to the method, maybe create method or maybe other method, which will expect a parameter, not number, not name and not address, rather employee class object is what we are expecting right now. So normally for consistency purpose, people may do this. People may write down same method again and one with a parameter called as employees emp. So if you try to understand, is it not overloaded method? This may be, you can say, by mistake done, but or this may be deliberately done to remain to a coding standard in a consistent way. So what we have is we have got create with parameter called as emp now. So we have two things to do now. Whenever normally you give a call to create, like when you type it /home/create, I want to return the empty view along with empty text boxes. But whenever you will create a submit button click on create view, at that time I want the submitted data to get populated into so-called employee object. And then I'll add employee object into this method itself. So how do we achieve this? We have got two create methods, one which is without a parameter and one with a parameter called as emp. Is it not going to create any confusion now? Let's try understanding it. Let's run this now. F5. I'm going to type on /home and /create now. Last time when I run this URL, you saw that there was a blank UI available. Now I'll say create again, and now we have a problem here. And the problem, if you notice, is very simple. That is, create on a controller type called as home controller is ambiguous because of the following action methods. We have got create and we have got one more create which is called as emp, which means now MVC engine is confused. Which create method you want it to call? Create without a parameter or create with a parameter? Now how do we resolve the situation? If you understand it clearly, when we want to call which method, are we clear about it first? If one has to give a call to empty create method, we want to return empty view to the user, which means this is whenever user calls over the URI, which means user types it. Second, this is this is the method we want to call when user clicks on submit button. But then if you have noticed this, we have two ways to give a request to server side. One request type is normally called as get request and one request type is called as post request. What's the thin difference between get and post? So in order to understand that get and post request, we will take a pause here and we will continue with this in a while. Now, normally whenever browser raises a request to the server, it can be of many different types. For example, well-known request types are get, post, put, delete, and a simple header. Now, majority of the request types which are generally used are get or post. almost 90% of the time we guys use get as a request type. Now, um, there's a very thin difference between get and post if you see. As you can see from the diagram in front of you, we have a client which is a browser. We have a server which can be a web server wherein a website is hosted. Now, when the request is raised by the client or a browser, you will see the request is always given using HTTP as a protocol. A packet is sent from client to server and the response is sent back in the same way from server to client. Now, when the request is raised from client to server, how data is passed on from client to server or server to client? Is the data passed on in the header section of HTTP or is it passed in the body section of HTTP? And based on that, the request type is decided. So when data travels in the header section of HTTP, it's called as GET request. And when the data travels in the body part of HTTP, it's called as POST request. Which one is secure? So if you see, if data travels in the header, it can be seen easily. Plus it has one limitation that data is limited in size. But when data travels in the body section, it is bit secure, but using Fiddler like tool, one may be able to see that data easily. So even if post claims to be secure, one can very well see the data with the help of Fiddler like free utility. And generally seen behavior, how do I analyze, how do I understand that I'm giving get request or post request? So normally when you type the URL in the browser, so when you type and when you say enter, it means it's a get request. When you click on a href anchor tag, which we have already used some time back, it's kind of a get request. And then when you click on normal submit button, for example, when you have a login page, you enter some detail and you click on a login button, it's normally a post request. However, scene may change and programmatically you can decide which kind of a request to be raised when the submit button gets clicked also. Can we really decide using a program which language we should use for this? So obviously, if it's client side who is going to go and raise the request, we may end up using JavaScript like code. And using JavaScript, you can very well decide whether to give a request which is get request or post request. So in general, scene behavior is post is bit secure than get. And now we will come back to our demonstration. So as you may have noticed, we received exception when we gave a call to a create method. So again, if I run the code now, and if we give a call to index method, and if I type by myself /home/create, you end up in error because the kind of a request that I raised was a get request, and there are two methods which can help me in getting the reply. That is one create without any parameter and one create with a parameter. So now MVC engine is confused which create you want it to call. So quick thing or quick question here. Is it like this create method and this create method are by default getting called over get or are they getting called over post? Remember this, we discussed that default when you type the URI, the call is always over get. And now this create and this create both are getting called over get request. Then if you notice what is it that we want to achieve, we want whenever a normal call, normally you type, I want this create to be called. And when you click on submit button after creating the data, after filling up the data, I want this create to be called. So obviously a thin difference I want to have between these create methods itself is one create I want to call over get and one create I want to call over post. And when nothing is specified with create method or any method, default the method is always going to get called over get. And the confusion is there are two create methods to be called over get. And to resolve the problem, we have to tell MVC that this method we need to call over post now. So we'll specify here post as a attribute which will convey MVC that this method need not be called or need not be allowed to be called over get. Now when I put a breakpoint here again and if I say F5, notice what happens now. I'll give a call to index method first. Let's say F5 and continue. Let's give a call to /home/create on the page. So I'll give a call by myself home/create. It's a get request. Hit it. Now we don't get any error. Reason behind that, now you have clearly put up a difference that when exactly which create method to be called. So this create method gets called over get now. This will simply find the UI and give us the output. That is this. You may enter now any data that you want. Let's say name is new name and address is suppose Mumbai if I enter. Now where is the submit button that we have? So we will put up now a submit button which should directly or indirectly should give a call to a create method which is over a post. So what will I do now? I'll go to create ASPX page again, and this entire content that we have I'm going to submit using input type equal to submit. As I said, there is another way available that you may write down JavaScript, and using JavaScript you may submit the data to server side. Now here I may not pass on the name. I'll just specify value for this submit button. Let's call this as create new employee. But then on submission, have specified which particular method to call on server side? Have we have specified that on submission we need to give a call to /home/create which is on post, and how do we specify this? So we have to go back to traditional or classic ASP. That is, we have to add on a tag called as form tag, and inside the form tag we can specify the method or a page that we wish to call on server side is /home/create, and the way we want to submit the data, that's over post, and then the entire data or entire content can be put up into the form tag itself. So if you see, using submit button click, we have conveyed that the form needs to be submitted to so and so page or so and so method, and we also conveyed the way, that is how the data should travel, whether it's a gateway or whether it's a post way. Now again I'm going to run the program, but this time I'm going to go and remove the breakpoint at index, and let's run now. Again I'll hit F5. I'll give a call to /home/create. We get a get view, and now we'll enter some new data, 45, suppose new, and suppose Mumbai over here. And now I'm going to click on create new employee button. Let's see what happens now. Click here and have a look. What has happened behind the scene? We are able to call now a create method, and then if you carry a cursor out here, you will find out suddenly number 45, name new, and address Mumbai. Now a question must be there, like how it collects the value from the correct text boxes. It collected 45, number value 45 from the correct text box. It collected name from the correct text box and address even from the same text box. Who created this object of EMP? I never created object, and neither client-side ASPX or client-side HTML that you see will be able to create a EMP object, because client-side does not know about the EMP at all. So the problem is deliberately, like problem statement is how ASP.NET MVC engine understands how to create EMP object also, and how does it fill the data from the respective text boxes. And the trick was, we specified in the markup, if you see, name for every control, and name for the control was number, name for the control was name, name for the control was address. Now name is really required for the controls if we have to take the data from these controls and push it into some sort of, you can say, class object like employee also. Why it has created employee class only? Why it did not create any other class object? So again, if you notice create ASPX, we already have conveyed at the top to server side, that is this data submitted from this page will be used for creating object of type EMP, which means since EMP is a model, MVC assumes that EMP is the one which I'll give on a page, and EMP object is the one which even I will create whenever data gets submitted to server side. So because of this name concept and because of the strictly typed view concept called as EMP view, you'll find out MVC is able to create now employees object out here. But what if I want something different? What if I want some customization? What if I want name to be prefixed with Mr. and Mrs.? What if I want maybe employees collection to be created? In such cases, we have to take a control over MVC lifecycle. And if you recall, in MVC lifecycle, we discussed about certain methods which are called in sequence and which are available for overriding purpose. So we may have to do that job, and then that way we will be able to take a complete control over this so-called form collection or form data collection, and we'll be able to create any object that we want at any moment. So that part is something called as filters. So one of the filter type we'll try to understand, wherein we can very well fetch the data. This is also one, there is also one way specifically meant for this only, that's called as model binder. So we discussed earlier concept called as where exactly customization is allowed in case of MVC lifecycle, and that's allowed in filters, that's allowed in model binder, that's allowed in MVC controller factory, and that's also allowed in so-called view engines as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to return the same view as it is to user. So again I get blank, but I never want a blank. What I want is after user submits the EMP object, I want to add on that object into that collection that we have. Now notice a collection here. This collection that we constructed is surrounded by the curly brackets, which means the scope of this collection is between this start curly bracket and end curly bracket. So I want this EMPS collection to be available all over in all other functions. So how can I make it available to all other functions? And to make it available, can we maintain the state of EMPS as a collection whenever multiple number of requests comes to server and multiple replies also travel from the server? So you guessed it correctly, we can use sessions in this regard. So as we discussed, view state is not a concept available in MVC. So can we maintain the state of any data, any object or any control? We can with the help of server-side state management. Default is session. Can we have cookies, query strings? We do have it. And like we discussed some time back, we have used query string for transferring content from one action method to another action method in a simple way. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to hold this EMPS list into a session, and we'll use that session to basically populate some new data and edit some existing data also. So instead of continuing with this example, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a complete new fresh example wherein we'll create some task list oriented application or task list specific application. So in the MVC example, we'll be creating a task list. We will be adding some task into it. We will be removing some tasks, and we will be editing some tasks, and we'll be creating some tasks. So how do we do that part using MVC is what will be the next session. So wherein we'll talk about all CRUD operations, though we will not have database in picture, but still we'll try to simulate the database in the basic MVC part.